All right. So we'll kick off after the first afternoon session. I don't know what's worse, before lunch or after lunch, but hopefully everyone enjoyed a great lunch. I'm Andrea Doucet. Is the mic okay? Or is it too loud? It's good? Okay. I'm Andrea Doucet from Masaryk University in Canada, and I'm presenting with Peter Moss, my co-author of this book, and he's from University College London in the UK. So we are very happy to to be with you, all of you today, and to share some of the ideas that are in this small book that we've just published. It came out in April. It's in print, and it's also free and open access. This is our first time presenting together ever, and it's our first time speaking about the book. So you can, my daughter, who's an actor, would call this the international premiere. So there you are. Just bear with us if we stumble a bit, and thank you all for your great ideas and questions, which I know will follow. So Peter and I are each going to speak for about 10 minutes, and I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to him. And I'm going to start with some of the background to the book. One of the stories behind this book. So we start the book by saying that we owe a debt of gratitude to the generous and active communities of researchers who work on parental leave and parenting leaves. This book came out of 2 decades of conversations with 2 networks, one of which has been around for more than 20 years. So the first is the International Network of Leave Policies and Research. Many of you here are part of that network. As many of you know, Peter Moss and Fred Devon are the founders, and they were the first co-coordinators of that network. And there are 2 activities that take place through the Leave Network. One is the annual seminar, which will be happening here in Prague later this week, and the other is the annual review. And Peter has edited that annual review for over 20 years. It was the annual seminar in Athens a couple of years ago that when Peter and I started to talk about the idea of writing a book about care leaves, about care and parenting leaves. And Peter has been part of the editorial team of the annual review, so that, sorry, I just said that. I ad-libbed there. That work makes this book possible. So we just wanted to make sure we acknowledge that, and also to say that several people from the Leave Network and Cost Action read drafts of the book and gave us really excellent feedback. And I want to acknowledge Marion Baird from Australia, and Sophie Devander and Cassandra Engemann from Sweden, and Alison Klazowski and Margaret O'Brien from the UK, and Jessica Hobbs from the UK. So thank you. We hope that, we know there's still a lot of questions, but we hope we've done justice to your comments. And the second network that we wanted to mention is the Cost Action, which you all know about because we're all here today. We've drawn selectively on the reports. They were super helpful. From Working Group 1, which produced the book, led by Alison Kozlowski and Anne-Sophie Devander, those conversations were quite formative in our thinking because we're all dealing with different questions about how to theorize and conceptualize and move forward with parental leave. The second story behind this book is context. And I'll just read this, which is on page 1 of the book. We write this book at a time when most countries around the globe are facing care crises, a dire situation of gaping and growing chasms between care needs and society's capacity to meet these needs. It's also a time of polycrisis, where care crises unfold as part of an array of colliding and compounding social, political, economic, and ecological crises. And yet, amid these crises, we write this book on care leaves and care time with hope. And so we've been talking about these issues of care crises and larger crises this morning, so it does fit nicely with the conversations that are going on. So the other story behind the book that I wanted to mention, and this is actually the second chapter of the book, is called Care Concepts. This book is very much guided by the work of Joan Tronto, who's an American political scientist and a care ethics thinker. And in the introduction of the book, we ask the question, why Tronto? Because we do draw on a lot of other really excellent care thinkers in the book, including Carol Gilligan, Martha Feynman, Nancy Fraser, Nancy Folbray, Kathleen Lynch, just to mention a few. And so why Tronto? Tronto was one of the first to highlight care as a political and policy issue. And she did that in 1993 in a book called Moral Boundaries, A Political Argument for an Ethic of Care. This book was one of my close, loving companions when I did my PhD. It was unlike anything I had read before. And in that book, she wrote about how the concerns and activities of the relatively powerless are omitted from the central concerns of society. And she sought to remap the current boundaries of moral and political life. And she wrote that the world would look very different if we put care at the center of our political lives. Now, this is something we all know, we are all working on, but she introduced this through a care ethics literature. And then the book that we drew most closely on, Caring Democracy, Markets, Equality, and Justice, came out in 2013. And she's continued to write for the past decade, and is writing another book right now, actually, on bad care. So she's still actively writing on these issues. And in Caring Democracies, she writes that nothing will get better until societies figure out how to put responsibilities for caring at the center of their democratic political agendas. And two of the quotes that we actually start the book with are, among the most important considerations in rethinking society from a caring perspective is creating time and space for care. Time can be reordered around people's lives in ways that make it possible to live better. There is a way to turn our world around. It requires us to recommit to caring for ourselves and others by accepting and rethinking our caring responsibilities and providing sufficient resources for care. So she's always interested in the political processes that make care possible and in the funding from state and other organizations to make that possible. So we have two aims in the book. The aims are very similar to what Cost Action is doing, actually, and thinking about future directions for parenting leaves. The first is to contribute to and provoke discussion and debate about the urgent need to transform care leaves to make them more relevant and responsible to a contemporary context of a polycrisis. And the second is to propose a rethinking and reconceptualization and a reforming of care leaves by expanding their temporal and conceptual frames. And so in that vein, at the center of the book, we have what we called a bold yet modest proposal. And we present it in three parts and three shifts. And these parts and shifts are social, economic, and ecological, and that ties in with the sustainability conversations. The first shift is from parenting leaves to care leaves and care time across the life course. We see that as both a temporal and a social ecological shift, because we do talk about care to care for ecological worlds, which is probably one of the most provocative points. Number two, the second part of the bold yet modest proposal, from care leaves as conditional employment benefits to care leaves and care times as universal social rights with a care income. So this builds on the work of the network, especially Sonia Bloom and Ivana Dobertik's work in the handbook that they produced with Allison. So this is a shift to social and economic, but also ecological inclusiveness. And the third shift is from care leaves as conditional employment benefits to care leaves and care time as part of an expanded approach to universal basic services. Again, that's probably we think it's a provocative idea, but we think it works. So it's a shift to new conceptual frameworks. Let me just very quickly get into the first two and then turn it over to Peter. So the first shift, which we call the temporal and sociological shift, is about care leaves across the life course, and we talk about 5 forms. This fits in nicely with what we were talking about this morning about synergies with care leaves. Like, a lot of us have been working on parenting leaves, and we add parenting time, support it for short periods of time with a care income. We also add reproductive leaves and reproductive time, and that's we drew a lot on the work of Marion Baird and colleagues. adult care leaves and adult care time. So we've been talking about elder care leaves, health care leaves and health care time. So that replaces sickness benefits. Sickness, we prefer to see it as wellness or health. And the fifth, which is about care time, and that's a central concept in the book, and that's perhaps the boldest concept in the book. Lifetime entitlements to care leaves and care time, which include, for example, personal care leaves and time, so care of the self, community and civic leaves time, care of the communities we live in, and ecological care leaves and time, to care for the ecological worlds that are part of and not separate from us. The second shift is a shift to social, economic, ecological inclusion. So care time is a big part of this, and as I said, it's perhaps the boldest part of our proposal, is our call for care time for all. And it builds on ideas and critiques of universal basic income and includes the idea of a care income, which we borrowed from Mary Murphy, an Irish sociologist, which are selected lifetime entitlements to care for children, elders, family, and significant others. It's about care of the self, care of our communities, and care of non-human and ecological worlds. Theoretically, this is a shift, and Kathleen Lynch does this really well in her work, so does Joan Tronto, Nancy Fowlbury, all the care theorists, from Homo economicus, the rational economic man, to Homo curans, which is the caring person. And it's an understanding, this is the heart of care ethics. Humans are relational and independent beings whose well-being and indeed survival depends on good care. And that's not to say that as humans we don't have moments of our lives of autonomy, independence, or we feel that way. But it is the case that at the beginning of life and at the end of life and at many times in between, we rely on others for care that is essential to our survival and to our flourishing. We go a little bit further with this, from Homo economicus to Homo curans and Homo ecologicus, which is a way of thinking of ourselves as ecological beings. And here we draw on work. I say I because I've written with Indigenous colleagues on ecological concepts of care, but we brought this into our conversation. But the idea is that we are not only relational beings, we are ecological beings. So this is a hard shift to make because our ways of thinking are so steeped in individualistic, liberal, and neoliberal classical economic theories. They govern a lot of our thinking. Newtonian theories actually govern our thinking as well. So it's difficult to make this shift from Homo economicus to Homo ecologicus. But the idea here is that the ecological is in us and it's not separate from us. So what I've learned from indigenous and ecological thinkers is what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. So we need to start thinking about this. Turning it over to Peter to take you into the third shift.
Thank you very much. Okay. So the third shift is to this new conceptual framework, which conceptualizes care leaves as part of Universal Basic Services, or UBS for short. And UBS, in the words of Anna Coote, a leading proponent of this concept, guarantees collectively generated activities that are funded or otherwise supported by the state and that enable people to meet their needs and are available to all according to need and not ability to pay. And past discussions of UBS usually include in UBS housing, education, healthcare, transport, internet, and care services. We propose care leaves should also be included as a universal basic service. And Ian Goff, another proponent of UBS, argues that universal basic services encompass social rights, social entitlements, equity, solidarity, sustainability, that word again that's so important, and collective responsibilities to ensure that people's general needs are satisfied in order to live a flourishing life. So the concept of the flourishing life is very important to this discussion. And finally, UBS approaches are also connected to social, economic and ecological sustainability. Anna Kut again, ecological sustainability is built into its purpose and design in that they are a set of proposals for achieving universal access to life's essentials within the limits of a finite ecosystem. We apply our bold yet modest proposal in an imaginary country and through 7 fictitious examples. So, we take readers into an imaginary country, what we call the CW Republic, with CW signalling caring worlds. This is a country that exemplifies caring democracies, caring economies and caring worlds. It's a country where the government has taken responsibility for ensuring care leaves and care time for all. We imagine there has been another pandemic that has really brought home the need to take care as central to society and to the future evolution of that society. And so we have 7 fictitious examples, and here is just one of those examples. It's the example of Claire and Blair on an IVF journey. We try and provide lots of different examples for lots of different families. I just read you from this little case story we've imagined. Claire, 37, is a community nurse, and Blair, 32, is a freelance graphic designer who is between contracts and actively applying for work. She has no work at present. Unlike Claire, Blair therefore does not qualify for employment-based leaves. They're a lesbian couple who desire to have a child and have opted for IVF from an anonymous sperm donor through a licensed fertility clinic. And it's Claire who will undergo the process. As the treatment is time-consuming and both physically and emotionally arduous, Claire uses 9 days plus 2 hours a day for 10 days of reproductive care leave. Remember, that was our second group of care leaves. And Blair, her partner, uses 3.5 days of reproductive care time because she doesn't have a job, she can't take leave, so that she can drive, support and care for Claire during her conception and pregnancy journeys. After Claire becomes pregnant and gives birth to a healthy baby boy, Luca, she takes 6 weeks of pregnancy birth leave. Then Claire and Blair each take 6 months of full-time and part-time parental leave and parental time. One takes parental leave because they have a job, the other takes parental time because they don't. And that includes a month together early on, but they're each saving some days, or some weeks actually, for when Luca is older, so they will be very flexible leave for them. So, as Andrea has already mentioned, we call our proposal bold yet modest. It's bold because the proposal completely changes care leaves conceptually and structurally. Part of UBS life course covering ecological as well as social and economic needs. It's bold because it goes beyond the idea of care leave from employment towards the idea of care time for all. It's bold because our proposal supports a major shift in the rationale for care leaves. So to earlier rationales like health, work-life balance, and gender equality, we have added the right to give and the right to receive care. Children, adults had the right to receive care. And we also add the rationale of social and ecological sustainability. And it's bold because we connect care leaves to those wider concepts that Andrea mentioned: care time, care economies, care democracies, and caring worlds. Caring time, by the way, is slow time. I think we're quite influenced by the slow movements, ideas of slow food, slow pedagogy, even slow professors. We think care takes time, it can't be hurried. So that's the bold side. Why do we say it's a modest proposal? Because policies are always work in progress, and that's true of our proposal. We hope others will take this proposal further and adapt it to be more responsive to ever wider groups of individuals and people. In short, to think about future directions of care leaves. And that's in a way is the challenge of the book. What direction do you think care leave should be taking? We are also very aware that policies can have unintended consequences, because when care leave is not well designed and is not complemented by other care work policies that promote gender equality, then care leave can backfire and threaten, undermine gender and social equity. In short, care leaves can be progress or they can be pitfall. It's also modest because we're not prescriptive. We aim to provoke discussion and debate. We offer and apply our proposals with a very broad brush through offering fictional examples, and we deliberately avoid detailed discussion of implementation. It's modest because we treat care leaves and care time as part of a larger landscape of care policies. Complementary measures are also needed, a wide array of good quality, readily available, publicly funded and culturally appropriate services for children, elderly people and disabled persons. Leave policies should never be an alternative to such policies, to such services, And finally, why is our proposal modest? Well, we do acknowledge the current context is challenging, to put it mildly. It's hard to push for policies that seek to validate, prioritise and adequately fund care, but we are modestly hopeful that the creation of progressive, inclusive and equitable care policies could be a possibility. And finally, last but not least, we are modest about taking credit for the ideas in the book. As we said at the beginning, we owe a debt of gratitude to the generous and active communities of care and parenting leave scholars, many of whom are present today, including colleagues in the Leave Network and the Cost Action Network. And I just add a special note of gratitude to Laura Adati and her colleagues at the International Labour Organization, especially for their 2022 report that we found very, very interesting, and that's called Investing in Care Leave and Services for a More Gender Equal World of Work. If you've not read that ILO report, I really recommend it to you. So let me end up with the words of three major influences or influencers on our thinking. First, Joan Tronto. If a democratic society has any commitments at all, it must have a commitment to making care, both receiving and giving care, equally and widely available to all. So the distribution and the availability of care becomes central to the idea of a caring democracy. Then Professor Tim Jackson, in his very important book published last year called The Care Economy. The economy should concern itself first and foremost with care in all its forms, rather than with relentless growth as it does for the moment, because prosperity is primarily about health. The economy, therefore, should always and everywhere be about care. It's about economy as care, not care for the economy as care. And finally, Nancy Fraser. The trick is to imagine a social world in which citizens' lives integrate wage earning, caregiving, community activism, political participation, and involvement in the associational life of civil society, while also leaving time for having fun. Let us not forget that. And finally, just to remind you from what Andrea said at the beginning, you can access the book in two ways. You can buy it through Policy Press, and if you buy it before the end of October, you get a healthy 50% discount. Or you can read it free online. Just enter the title and the authors and you can go straight through to a website. And finally, I'd just also like to invite you all to join us online for a book launch on June the 3rd at 1500 Central European Time with Joan Tronto. She will be present online, and also Nancy Falbra will also be with us. They will be contributing. And if you haven't registered already and you want to, contact Andrea or me. Our emails are there, and we will send you the links on how to join. So thank you very much for your attention.
All right, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here along with my colleague Solveig Cunningham to fill up the second half of this afternoon BR session. This time we are going to present another type of resource. It is a new data set that has been recently added to the online archive of the Generations and Gender program. This data set can be used for various research tasks related to the kinds of research that most of you do. So we hope to recruit new users to the community of users, and we also want to discuss briefly the future, that is, future data collections, future questionnaires that will be fielded. And in that second part, we are hoping that possibly we could get productive feedback from you as experts in the topics that the questionnaire covers. You have a little flyer in your conference bags, so even if you are half asleep because lunch was so tasteful, you will be able to find out the details about the survey and the data in your bags. We decided to split the presentation into two parts. First, Solveig is going to tell you something about the Generations and Gender program in more general global perspective. She will highlight how it functions and how it meets the needs of the research community. And then I will walk you briefly through the questionnaire to highlight what variables are included there, and then we will talk about the future. So Solveig, if you would please start.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nothing like a loud American to wake you up. So, who here has heard of the GGP? If you have, how about you stand up? That'll really interfere with your afternoon nap. And here's the trick. The trick of the question here is that everybody has heard it, because here we are. Great, thanks everybody. Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for, I didn't want to really get in people's ears. Thanks very much for including me in this amazing conference. I'm really enjoying hearing all of the work that's gone into this project. So the Generations and Gender program is based at the Netherlands Interdisciplinary Demographic Institute. So I am here representing the Central Data Hub. The mission of the program is to collect and make available cross-nationally comparable data to address demographic challenges. And there I succeeded in the first challenge of pressing the right button. So the GGP has been around for almost a quarter of a century. It's been based at the NIDI since 2009. It is an international consortium, and many of our colleagues here are part of consortium countries. The data are longitudinal, so we follow individuals over time. Depending on the country, this is adults anywhere from 18 to 59 or 79 years. It is in 30, it currently runs in 30 countries. And again, the central hub, which is where I'm based, does the coordination, management, and knowledge exchange for the consortium. A few things that I want to tell you about the design. We take a life course approach. We, again, do longitudinal data collection every few years. And we offer comparable data collection so that the data are harmonized in such a way that you can compare across countries within Europe and beyond. Here's a beehive of the topics that are covered in the Generations and Genders survey. You'll notice that there are many themes that are quite relevant to the work that many of us in this room do. There are also, in addition to the standard modules, which are listed here, you'll see in orange a country-specific module that is added with topics that are relevant in specific countries at their request and interest. And we do include new modules. So we actually just completed solicitation for new modules to be included in the next round of data collection. A few things that I want to share, even for those of you who know the program, what's new. One is that the Generations and Gender Survey 2 is in the field. So you see the data collection happening in 2027, with some countries being in different data waves, but again, collecting comparable data overall. Second thing I want to share is that the GGP is in the process of entering the ERIC, so becoming one of the ERIC infrastructures. This process is currently underway as we're setting up founding partnerships with the countries where the ministries are willing to make a financial commitment for at least 5 years. So we have the founding members in place. There's still an opportunity for countries to become founding members. Additionally, there are also possibilities for country programs to join as observer in an observer capacity. The GGP is also engaging with a few other data infrastructures and programs. So there are 2 new infrastructure projects that have been funded, listed at the top. There's also integration with other EU projects, including the So Green project, which includes data on the environmental and climate engagement, as well as Gauthier Next Generation. Finally, for those of you who are interested in data analysis opportunities, a few things that may be of interest to you. As Martin said, the data are open access. You can browse them. You can very easily sign up to use. Countries are still welcome to join for round 2 of the data collection. If you're thinking especially about policy relevant research, this is a great data set to use. And if you're interested to know more about it, talk to one of us. So over to you, Martin.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now more specifically about the most recent addition to the database. It is the Czech GGS 2 survey. We have already completed 2 waves, so that offers several very exciting analytical opportunities. Briefly, the Czech Republic has been a part of the GGP program since its very start. The first cycle began in this country more than 20 years ago. At that time, the panel had 2 waves. The second cycle began in 2020. Of course, the first field work was a little bit complicated due to COVID and other things, so we didn't finish the interviews until 2022. And then last year, we managed to carry out the second wave of the second cycle. And this last wave is the most recent addition to the data archive. One thing, the Czech sample initially had 5,500 respondents. In wave 2, we had about 66% retention rate, which we believe is a fairly good percentage for a panel that has waves 3 years apart. This is the thing that we would like you to use the most. Now, what is in the questionnaire? I know that many of you stood up at the beginning when Solveig invited you to vote on your familiarity with the survey, but I would like to walk you through the questionnaire briefly to highlight where the research opportunities are, but also where there is room for cooperation to improve the questionnaire. So the main sections relevant to this group, in my view, are first respondents and partners, economic activity, where people have to choose one that best applies to them. And on the list of options, there is also the maternity, paternity leave or childcare leave. And then there is also the question of duration, so time since last transition. In the second wave, we also have a question on what happened between the two waves. So were there any changes? And if yes, whether any leave, childcare leave, lasted for at least 3 months. Then, for those who are presently taking leave, there are two questions on the opportunity to return to their previous job after the leave is completed. That's a binary question. And then their intention to return to the same workplace. Then there is a long set of questions on work conditions for those who are presently employed at the time of the interview. And then there are questions about flexible work arrangements. So it's about the employer's policy. Do they make it possible for you to arrange work so that it would align well with your other duties? Then there are questions about night, evening, and weekend work, both for the respondent and possibly also for the partner. Then there are two questions about work from home. One is frequency, and then it's the number of hours. Then there is a block of questions related to parenthood. One simple question, whether they left their last job for childcare purposes. And then there is a battery of questions, hypothetical questions about parenthood conditions, which ask people, imagine that you would decide to have a child in the next 3 years. Do you expect the following conditions to be met? And what we have in that battery is first, there will be satisfactory childcare available to me, and then subjective assessment of respondents' ability to balance family and work. Oops. I almost failed the second challenge. Then there are some attitudes about working mothers and fathers, ideal working hours, and then some gender values. Household organization. Did you receive any help with childcare? Who was the person helping? How many hours they spent helping you? Formal childcare usage, and also the provision of childcare. That is when the respondent helps someone else outside of household. And then division of labor within the household. So this is a a selection of items from the variable, from the questionnaire that I believe is most relevant to you. If you want to access the data, the easiest way is to go through the GGP data portal. The web address is up there. For documentation and meta data, you can also use the Collectica repository, which is listed here as well. It's easy, it's free of charge, as long as you use it for research purposes, not for business purposes. If you ever want to incorporate GGS data into teaching, we do have a few teaching data sets that are easier to process, easier to navigate. For students to overcome the initial cost of learning about the data, this could be a great start. A few of the variables that I mentioned before are also included in the teaching data sets, especially the ones on work-life balance and family and gender attitudes. So in my view, you can teach half of your statistics courses using the GGS data, and we would be very happy if that happens, because it just increases familiarity with the data in the population. So this is the present. The future. I know that it might sound too far in the future, but we are already thinking about how to organize the third cycle of GGS data collection. Presently, we believe the fieldwork could start 5-6 years down the road, but since we know that the questionnaire, we already have plans to modify the questionnaire, and any input, any improvement would be appreciated. So if you have any ideas, if you already know the data, if you know the questionnaire and you believe that there are items, scales, terminology that could be improved, talk to us or talk to Monika Minarska, who is the current head of the questionnaire task force. We invited Monika to be here as well to network with you. She couldn't come, but she mentioned that several of you are her colleagues from other projects, so you can approach her directly, but I'm happy to help you get in touch with her. We can start this task essentially immediately. I know that many of you have done important work in this area, so hopefully you will be ready to impact the questionnaire immediately. The other thing, when we look into the future, is geographic coverage. This map shows you the countries where, at least at some moment, GGS data were collected. It's over 30 countries, as Solveig said, but still, for serious comparative research, if you want to study policies, the heterogeneity of policies and policy effects, larger coverage is always desirable. So if you are from one of those countries that are not covered yet and would possibly be interested in running the GGS in your country, you can either go to this guide that explains what you need to do to join the GGP project, or talk to us and we will be happy to arrange things. And if you are around at the European Population Conference next week in Bologna, I'm going to be there, Solveig is going to be there, and other colleagues related to the GGP community are going to be there. So you're welcome to talk to us, and I'm hoping that we will be able to expand the GGP to countries that are not covered yet. And that was my last slide. Thank you for your attention.
Earlier, Fred, this is an observation, Fred talked about the complementary ways of working, numbers, data, and maybe stories, and we've experienced that just now. And it's a bit overwhelming, actually, thinking about how we could possibly integrate these two amazing paradigms, because we need both. We need the story, the account, the narrative, but we also do need granular data. And there are many gaps. I'm just thinking, again, free associating here, looking at maps on who's engaged in, not so much the story side, but the data side. We've got America, it's not part of the data family that you're fronting, and also Canada is not there. I wondered what engagements might happen on that front. And America is really quite far away from the story, the caring world story that you've been telling us about. Canada, very different.
Thank you.
Another observation to both duos. Go on, keep on. I mean, it's really good work. Even if you have a brief presentation here, and as Martin said, you will have it well beyond 2030, your third and so on. So, a lot of respect for your work. Thank you.
Can I ask if you have issues that we've been talking about this morning about terminology and comparing the policies? When you had, like I know when we've done surveys, some people don't know if they know they're on leave, but they don't know if it's called maternity or parental, and sometimes they just call it maternity leave, even though it's, so how do you deal with the terminology differences between 30 countries and best you can?
It's very complicated. And the other thing is the terminology evolves even within countries. And then if you repeat the same survey, the questionnaire that once was fine may no longer be quite appropriate. So it's difficult. The other thing is, of course, an ideal solution for a survey organizer to address potential inadequacy of the terminology of the language would be to carry out cognitive interviews with a small sample of respondents and walk them through the questionnaire and ask them to tell you when something just doesn't sound appropriate. But then, you do it in 30 countries, and then the feedback might be quite conflicting. So, and then you make compromises. But nevertheless, even we are aware of those compromises of the history. But still, it doesn't mean that we want to give up on improving the questionnaire. And that's the primary reason why we are here. Because, it's always possible that someone will come up with a suggestion that will not compromise comparability of the questionnaire across cycles and will be easier for people to relate to. So, we are here to signal openness to you, and then hopefully something good will happen.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things with survey data, as opposed to registry or other types of data, is that you get the respondent's perspective. It may reflect the sort of the reality or not, right? So it may be that they say that they don't have access to care when, in theory, they really should. And I think that creates an opportunity. I think the session this morning highlighted, okay, the uncertainties are one thing, but the other thing is people's perspective and fears about the uncertainties that may really shape our behaviors. And so with these data, what we're able to do is get the respondents' perspectives, but we can also link those with national or even subnational data on actual policies, and look at the concordance between perceptions and what might be a real access, and as well as linking that with outcomes. So I think this potential enrichment of survey data with place, time based links with actual policies makes for some really cool research opportunities.